You could hear a pin drop in the Shanghai grandstands. For the second time in just 3 races, the reigning 4-time world champion is out. So today, we're going to break down Max Verstappen's shocking retirement at the 2026 Chinese Grand Prix and really get to the bottom of what went wrong for Red Bull. But here's the thing, this was way more than just a simple retirement. This was the breaking point of a weekend where the champ himself called his car undriveable. So you have to ask, why did the champion just walk away? What really pushed this usually unstoppable team right to the edge? I mean, for a team that's just so used to complete and utter dominance, seeing a DNF next to Verstappen's name, that's a huge deal. And this one, well, this one points to some serious problems that have been brewing just under the surface. So let's get down to the hard facts. It's lap 46. Verstappen gets on the radio and reports a sudden, total loss of what he calls deployment. His RB22 is just bleeding power, and the team, they've got no choice. They have to call him in and retire the car. Just like that. Okay, so what was that deployment he was talking about? To really get it, we need to dive deep inside the 2026 power unit and uncover the critical system failure that brought his entire race to a grinding halt. It all comes down to this one single component, the MGU-K. Now, in simple terms, this is the part of the engine that grabs all that energy when the driver slams on the brakes, shoves it into a battery, and then bam, unleashes it as a massive electrical power boost on the straights. It's absolutely crucial for performance. So here's the chain reaction that happened. Verstappen reports that loss of deployment because the MGU-K has completely failed. Word from the paddock is that the real root issue was a thermal runaway in the battery. Basically, it just catastrophically overheated. And the consequence of all that? The car was a sitting duck. It couldn't harvest or deploy any electrical energy at all. And you gotta understand why this is so critical with the 2026 rules. We're now in an era with almost a 50-50 power split between the good old combustion engine and the electrical systems. So losing your MGU-K isn't like losing some small part, no. It's like having half your car's power source just vanish into thin air. You're completely defenseless. And what does that actually feel like on track? Well, it feels like this. Right before the team pulled him into the pits to save the hardware, Verstappen was losing an estimated 15 kilometers per hour on that massive back straight. In Formula One, you might as well be standing still. But that failure, that was just the final straw. It was really a symptom of a much bigger disease that was plaguing Red Bull all weekend long. We're talking about the problem before the problem, a car that Max himself flat out called undriveable. This is the quote that pretty much defined his entire weekend. Not just, a little unstable, not tricky to handle, on ice. Think about that. That's a 4-time world champion describing a car that is totally unpredictable and has zero grip. So the engineering reason for that on-ice feeling is that the car has this incredibly narrow setup window. It really seems like Red Bull's core suspension philosophy is just clashing with the new aero regulations. They just can't find a balance that works. And this whole conflict created a super specific issue that Verstappen kept calling bogging down. Basically, every time the engineers would dial in more aerodynamic downforce to get more grip in the corners, the new power unit just couldn't keep up. It was like the car was being choked by its own downforce, starved of electrical power right when it needed it the most. And here's the real kicker. The team knew they were in deep trouble. They worked all through Saturday night, completely turning the car's setup upside down, just desperately trying to find a fix. And Max's verdict the next morning? It made zero difference. This wasn't a small problem. This was a fundamental flaw baked into the car. And that brings us to the bigger picture. This struggle isn't just about one bad weekend in China. No, it's about a fundamental conflict between Red Bull's entire design philosophy and this whole new world of the 2026 regulations. These regulations have completely changed the game. The whole focus has shifted, It's gone from a driver just pushing a car to its absolute ragged edge to a driver having to perform this complex energy management ballet, lap after lap. It's a completely different kind of racing. And that brings us right to Verstappen's now famous critique of these new rules. He has been by far the loudest critic, and his description of this new era as Formula E on steroids just perfectly captures his frustration with this new, complex, energy-saving style of driving. So this is the dilemma he's stuck in.
He's not just racing the other drivers anymore, he's actively fighting his own car. Red Bull is clearly on a very steep learning curve with their new in-house power unit, and for a pure racer like Max, this style of racing is just not fun. It's really wearing him thin.
And whenever a driver of his caliber isn't having fun, you really have to start asking the big question: is Max Verstappen losing his patience? This goes beyond the technical stuff and gets into the human fallout of this whole 2026 nightmare. The whispers you hear in the paddock, they're turning into actual conversations. Look, he's won everything there is to win in Formula One. So if the sport that he absolutely dominates is no longer fun for him, how long is he really going to stick around? And this isn't just wild speculation either. We have concrete proof he's looking elsewhere. His confirmed debut in the legendary Nürburgring 24 Hours endurance race, that shows he's already exploring other, maybe purer forms of motorsport, where he can just get in and push to the limit. Which leaves us with this one final critical question. Was the disaster in China just a one-off technical glitch on the road to an inevitable comeback? Or are we watching the beginning of the end for the whole Verstappen Red Bull era? Is the team truly in trouble? It's something the entire sport is going to be watching very, very closely.